School management is expected to return to work today, but unions have given their members a directive not to. The unions say the Education Department doesn't have any policies, regulations or protocols ready for the reopening. The South African Democratic Teachers Union, that's SATU, the South African Teachers Union and the National Professional Teachers Organisation of South Africa, or NAPTOSA, were scheduled to meet with the Education Department on Saturday, but that meeting was cancelled. So let's get more details on what to expect going forward. We're joined by Mugwena Maluleke, the General Secretary of SATU, Chris Klopper, the Chief Executive Officer of SAOU, and Basil Manuel. He is the Executive Director of NAPTOSA. Gentlemen, thank you. It's great to have you here on the program with us this morning.
Morning.
Thank you, Leanne.
All right, Chris, let me just jump in and start with you. Tell us a little bit more about this meeting that the unions and the Department of Basic Education was meant to have. That obviously didn't go ahead. It was cancelled on Saturday. Were there reasons given? Has it been rescheduled? What's going on there?
Well, let's start with the question, why did we ask for that particular meeting? Because on Friday, we realized that not one Department of Education had any of the requirements in terms of the COVID regulations in place. They did not have any masks. They did not have any of the sanitization packages in place. And furthermore, they did not have any protocols in place, for example, how to deal with teachers older than 60 years, how to deal with teachers with comorbidities like heart diseases, like respiratory problems, and the health problems like that. And when we started inquiring, it was clear that not one of the 9 provinces had anything in place. So it was not us, actually putting in an unfair demand to say that teachers should not return. It was just a question that there was non-compliance with the COVID regulations. And we think it's a reasonable demand that we made. And it was for the sake of the health and safety of our members, and nothing else than that.
Yeah. Certainly. So that was the reason behind the meeting. Any reason given as to why it did not go ahead?
Well, there was a meeting. It was actually just a discussion that took place, but there wasn't any resolutions that were taken. The big meeting will take place this morning at 12 o'clock. And the promise was that at that particular stage, later this morning, there will be a full submission made to us and that we will be able then to interrogate many of the issues that will be put on the table, and more specifically, the matters that I just raised now.
All right, good. So thanks for the clarity. There was a discussion that did take place, but there's a big one that's happening today. So at least we're all on the same page here. Mugwena, you said that you genuinely believe that Minister Angie Motshekga is concerned about the safety of learners and teachers, but there are forces behind her who are pushing for schools to reopen. Perhaps you can explain what you mean by this comment.
Yeah, thanks, Leanne. And I agree with Chris in terms of the meeting that is going to take place today, is that we are expecting that the minister will table a plan that is well coordinated, integrated when it comes to safety of the workers and the safety of the learners. The minister, in her own words, is always saying that she would not put the children of this country and the workers in the education system in danger. However, the pressure that might be coming from the provinces pushing for the reopening even before the compliance issues have been put in place, like Chris said, the issues of screening of the workers when they go to work. Like today, you are expecting the principal and all the school management team to be at school, and there is no sign of whether they will be screened before they go there. So the Minister of Employment and Labour has been very emphatic about the issue that all employers must comply with that. So clearly it is that what the minister is saying, on the other hand, that she has the best interest of the children, the best interest of the workers, and she will do anything to ensure that they are safe. It's not being put into practice by those that are supposed to do so. The forces that are advising her and the forces that are behind the plans that are so incomplete, so incoherent, are the ones that are making big mistakes, because the model that they are coming up with is not transparent, and we don't know where it is modeled, who are the mathematicians that are advising the minister to model the reopening in terms of the phase-in of particular grades, because we should be put on board, because our demands and our requests are very reasonable, very sensible. They're based on the fact that we want the best for the children and the teachers that are out there. So clearly it is that I may not be knowing exactly who is behind that, but we will know very soon who is behind it, whether it's a proxy about this fast-moving train to reopen the school without even having in place a tracking, regulations to then say, how are we going to be able to trace the contact of the learners or the teachers that might be infected and so forth? Because that is what the WHO is requiring, that the country must have the best tracking system before they even begin to reopen the schools, because schools are a place of density. Yeah. And this particular virus loves density.
Yeah. Basil, let me bring you into the conversation. What were some of the questions about policy and regulations that the department was not able to answer? We talked to transparency, as Mugwena rightly spoke to us about, talking about that this model doesn't seem transparent and then not understanding it. Please explain to us what you were expecting from the department and some of the explanations going forward.
Thank you, Leanne. First of all, when you just think about people returning today, that is our management teams, who is coming? What are the regulations about comorbidities? What about the over 60s? Then, of course, there are the fears of people. There are fears of those who are pregnant. What are we saying to them? We need clear guidelines and regulations so that every principal knows exactly what to do, and every provincial office and regional and district office as well. But it goes much further than that. It has to do with, how do we replace teachers? What are the regulations? What is the turnover time going to be? How are we going to ensure that there is a teacher in front of every class? What about the social distancing aspect? What about the deliveries? What does a school do if it doesn't receive sufficient of what has to come? Those are just some of the regulations, the HR things that have to be in place. Then, as has been mentioned already by Mugwena, what about the tracking and tracing? Because we want to know exactly what is going to happen. What are the protocols in terms of discoveries when somebody does register a high temperature? What are we going to do? Who's going to do this? Whose responsibility is it? Because we are adamant that, of course, it is not the teacher's responsibility to play nurse now and to 1,000 learners. When is the teaching going to happen? And those are the protocols we are saying we desperately need. But we also need to know that every school is actually equipped. Now, none of the provinces have called our teachers back today because they heard what the unions were saying. And of course, they couldn't prove to us, because the bottom line is not that we are unhappy about going back. Not at all. We want to go back when everything is right and ready, and the safety can be ensured of our members as well as the learners, and by extension, the parents. And none of the provinces could prove that. So in the absence of that assurity, we certainly could not advise our members to go back to school.
Yeah, and that is a relevant worry at this point in time of students. We talk learners, we talk teachers, we talk administration, all going back. And, the Minister of Labour made it clear that safety precautions have to be met for workers to return to any work environment. Do you think that the department will actually be ready anytime soon? I mean, the 1st of June is the date that's been given for learners, or some learners, to start making their way back to school. Do you think so? I mean, Chris, I'll come back to you and I'll try and get responses from everyone on this.
Well, the undertaking was that, yes, give us another week's time. That was the intimation. And then maybe we will be in the position, to deal with it. But if you look at the enormity of the matter, they have to provide 2 cloth masks for the almost 13 million learners, the 400,000 educators. They have to provide sanitation packages to 25,000 schools. If you just look at the logistics behind that to get the distribution in place, I doubt that if, let's say, for example, it arrives today in the country, because all indications are that it hasn't arrived yet from India and China. It's going to take at least another 2 weeks to get that to all the 25,000 schools. And the problem is that we can't start without those essential protection equipment in place. And it's not us that are determining that. We are saying just let's comply with the COVID regulations by the Department of Labour. And once that is in place, let's start with it. But it would be reckless and irresponsible to start with that, especially as has been intimated that it's a high-density environment, and there will be infections, and no one is sure how to deal with it. And I want to repeat it again. When we came to the conclusion on Friday, when we started asking the questions, how are we going to deal with some of these practical complexities? It came to the fore that none of the provinces really had any idea how to deal with these issues. And how can you send people back to school?
Yeah.
You ask them, they are also workers, they are also entitled to be dealt with in a safe and secure environment. You ask them to go back and no one has any answers to it. And we just thought that at that stage it's irresponsible. And we just said, let's comply before we start returning to schools.
Yeah. Chris, you bring up a vital point, because I was reading an article, I've read so much, I'm not sure where I saw it, but saying that some schools would be taking delivery of the procured materials today. So they'd actually physically be taking delivery of what you're talking to, the masks and all of these things. But what you're saying is, more than likely it hasn't even landed in the country because there is such a huge supply that we're talking to. We don't have that.
Absolutely correct. And that is why we are adamant to say that let's get everything in place. Let's not put the cart before the horse and make sure that we do the first things first, back to basics. It's not rocket science. And then once we have that in place, it's something that is required of all employers, then we can start returning to school. We are desperate to get back to school. We are all desperate to know that the grade 12s, that the time is running out for them, that we need to do something about that. We are also looking at the department to assist us and advise us on curriculum trimming for the other grades. None of that is in place yet. And hopefully today we will get some answers on those vital issues.
Yeah, we do hope so. Mugwena, let's come back to something that you spoke of and that really sort of piqued my interest in terms of the model that the Department of Education have put forward. I must say alarm bells went off in my head as well when we saw that discussion taking place where they were putting forward the proposal to the Portfolio Committee on Parliament, and they were giving examples from countries like, I've got it in front of me, they spoke to Taiwan, they spoke to Denmark, they spoke to Singapore, and they gave countries like that as examples. Can we honestly give those countries as examples where South Africa, as an education system, we have major challenges. And to talk to Denmark and Singapore and give those as an example of what we can follow, I mean, is this realistic?
Well, thanks for raising that issue. It's because, COVID-19 has really put the light on the inequalities in our countries, which we knew about, which are pre-existing. So you have this light that all of a sudden says you have 3,400 schools that we did not know that they don't have water, that they did not have ablution. And we know that we thought that it's only few schools that had problems where children had to drown in the pit latrines. So clearly, the models that they are following of Taiwan, the model of Denmark, clearly it is far removed from the reality that we're living in South Africa. For example, the Denmark model is based on the fact that they can have 10 to 15 learners in the classroom, that they can be able to afford 2 meters apart from each and every learner in the classroom. And clearly it is that they have the best model in terms of public transport to ensure that they are able to know how the children have traveled from home, and their welfare, their nutrition is one of the best. So if you compare the South African context where most of our children only get food when they're at school, and with my experience now of checking the food parcels that have been given to the poor in our country, was that we don't know what is nutritional value to assist the children and those who are working in the schools to fight any other virus that is really attacking us. So you have Taiwan that is providing all the best equipment to the learners. They separate the desk. They make sure that there is a screen. They also have double masks, and therefore they have got the classrooms that have got audio enhancers to be able that the teacher who's using a mask can be heard by the children. We don't have those enhancers in our situation, and therefore we are just relying on any plan that we can be able to put our hands on and really interrogate that particular plan and say, what are the South African contexts? What are the culture? What is the background of our learners that we're going to be getting? I mean, we're talking about 7 million people having HIV, and clearly that also includes the fact that some of our learners might be having those comorbidities, as Chris has been saying. So the model must be able to speak to our own situation as well. I doubt that by the 1st of June, we shall have all those 3,400 schools with water. I doubt that we shall be able to have the 3,400 schools with ablution, which is an issue of dignity. It's about the respect and the promotion of the dignity of the teacher, the worker that is at the school, and the learner that is there. So clearly, we are not being unreasonable to request that we be given assurances that as we reopen our schools, we are doing that in the best interest of the children and not in the best interest of policymakers, not in the best interest of the politician, because we must not find ourselves politicizing this particular matter, because this we are dealing with the lives of the people. Going back to my house, I have my family. Going back to that house, the learner has got the families. Now they tell us when they were presenting on the 29th that they have everything under control, including public transport. Immediately we get calls from the public transport people who are saying, have they ever spoken to us? How are we going to transport the learners if we're going to have 7 learners in my group, which was carrying 14, because I must now have 1. It means I must have the other one. Have they made those particular arrangements to ensure that they arrive on time? So the model they're using has got to be really speaking to our condition. There's nothing wrong to learn international experiences, but don't import them into an environment which can really spark another wave of transmission in our country. The numbers are going up by 500 every day. They're not going down. This is level 4. And therefore, the model needs to be able to assist us to then say, how are we going to deal with this particular situation? Yeah. Clearly, it is that the teachers are not sitting at home and folding their arms. They are doing everything to communicate with our students, but the inequalities are a barrier that we need to be able to address.
And they certainly are. Basil, I'll bring you in here very quickly. I mean, we talk to inequalities. We talk to the fact that, yes, there are very lucky learners that have computers. They have got internet access. They've been learning online. Some teachers, of course, have been giving these classes and working through various apps and whatever it may be to try and keep the curriculum going. But that must be a small percentage of the entire population of learners that are out there. I mean, perhaps you can give us an idea, because we mentioned in this interview that the inequalities of South Africa in the education system are coming out glaringly through this pandemic. How dramatic is this situation where those that are learning are this amount, but those that aren't is that amount? What are we looking at?
It's huge. It's enormous. Leanne, there's statistics in the paper published on Thursday last week by Nick Spall, showing that approximately 15% of learners have online access via a fixed line internet, and that another 30% of the total population would have the smartphones in their homes. So at best, we may be reaching 30 to 40% of our learners. But there's an important point of the number of teachers who have tried alternative methods with WhatsApp and so on. But it's still a fraction, because even though you may have a television and you have electricity, who says you have money to buy electricity to have that television on? So it has certainly highlighted the vast inequalities in our country. But what is positive about what has been done with all the online things is that it has started teaching us the things that we need to be doing into the future. But now what it has left us with is 2 groups of kids. Those children that have had access and that have moved on and virtually had all their lessons, and the vast majority sitting very far behind. And this is the reality, and we've got to learn from it. If nothing else, COVID-19 has to assist in getting rid of some of these inequalities. At any rate, it has brought home, as Mugwena said, to every single person just how bad the situation is out there, whether it be water, whether it be access, whether it be transport, and simply just health conditions. COVID-19 has shown us that we have a long way to go, but we are on the road now, and we've got to ensure that even at the end of this, every school ends up in a better place than it was before.
All right.
If it didn't have water, maybe now it has water.
Basil,
and that is the important thing.
Thank you very much, Basil. I want to give 30 seconds to each of you. I'm stealing a little bit of time, but I want to get an answer from each one of you as to where does this leave us for the academic year? Because this is the major problem. We've lost so much already. What do we do? Some people are saying scrap the academic year, push everyone through, worry about it next year. Others are saying, no, you can't do that. Let's get your opinion, and I'll give this to each one of you, and we'll wrap up the interview. So Chris, if I can begin with you, what happens to the academic year of 2020?
We have lost 42 days thus far, and it seems as if we may add another 5 or something more to it. The reality is that there are working committees busy with curriculum trimming. I don't think it's going to be justifiable to say that let's just implement the principle of progression. We think it can be salvaged if we do it carefully, if we do it objectively, but I don't think it's a lost cause. But we are eager to get back to school, all our members, and we want to rectify the position as quickly as possible. And we ask the public to trust us in this regard. We will do our utmost to actually act in the best interest of education.
All right, let's get a response from you, Maluleke.
Thanks, Dan. What needs to be done is that the department must really be working with us. The department must not work in silos so that we understand exactly what's going to happen. Look, what we are in charge of, all of us, is the school calendar. We can do whatever we want to do with that school calendar. We can really look at what we can assess. What is it that we can teach, the core concepts that needs to be taught, and then we can agree that this is what, in terms of the internal examination, will happen. Then we can look at the grade 12 and say, well, in terms of the grade 12, this is an external examination. How best can we assist the learners to be able to recover, but also what are the key concepts and key skills and knowledge and attitudes that they have got to be able to carry over and really and interact with the Department of Education and Training. The minister was very clear that they are ready to understand how far we have gone as we bring our learners into the higher education system. So yes, the academic year can be readjusted. We can reconfigure even the entire academic year as well as the curriculum too. As Chris has said, we don't have to do everything because we can extend this to 2021 by knowing very well what have we assessed this year, what have we taught this year, what happens next year. Thanks, Leanne.
All right, thanks very, very much, Mugwena, for that. And then finally, Basil, your thoughts on the academic year going forward and, of course, this meeting today, hoping something will come out of it.
Leanne, put differently, we at worst would have lost 1 out of 4 terms. That certainly doesn't suggest that the year is gone. There's enough time to do a lot of things. And there are the important building blocks that we must utilize. But we are the masters of the curriculum. We are the masters of assessment. And we are the people who determine what the curriculum must have. So there shouldn't be a panic about what we can salvage. I think Mugwena said, we still have a rollover time. The only people that we don't have rollover time with is the matriculants. And there too, we are in charge of the assessments. We are in charge of the curriculum. So why are we making it such a big issue? What we've got to do is also learn from other countries what they have done. We are selective in what we've learned, and other countries have also trimmed their final year. And their learners will also go to universities, etc. So no, NAPTOSA is very, very positive that there's enough of the year to save and enough to do. We mustn't try and create the impression that we can recover everything. We can't, but we can recover that which is important.
Gentlemen, thank you very, very much for talking to us. And, of course, I'll wrap that interview there. NAPTOSA, Sadtu and SAOU talking to us about their concerns about the Department of Basic Education not being ready to reopen schools as yet. Right, it has gone 7 o'clock.